Today's episode is brought to you again by the latest biohacking tool, which has made me much more productive and focused. It's called Magic Mind. It's a little drink, and I'm going to tell you more about it later in this episode. But for now, let's get started.
Project managers, have you ever felt like you should get that promotion or a better job? Start a business. Write that book. Have you ever felt you were made for more but didn't know where to start?
Welcome to the PM for the Masses podcast with your host, Caesar Abaid.
Learn from the experts. Think outside the box. Have a voice, network, and be extraordinary.
PM for the Masses podcast.
Well, hello and welcome once again to the Project Management for the Masses podcast. My name is Caesar Abaid, your host, and this show is your regular reminder that your career matters more than your job and that your life is a project and you are the manager. Whether you work for a company or for yourself, your job stability is really just your ability to land that next gig. So, join me in practicing intentional, planned, and value-adding relevance, starting right now. Well, my friends, it is a new year, so Happy New Year. It is now the year 2022, if you are listening to this in the future, as you definitely are. And this is the first episode of the year, so welcome. Thanks for listening. Over the holidays, I read a book on the future of work and how, as we are, hopefully at the tail end of this pandemic, a lot of companies that were not remote-based are now considering these options, right? So I read a book by Colin Ellis, who is our guest here today, who has been a guest in the podcast before. It's called The Hybrid Handbook. And I really, really enjoyed this book. It's a short read and very, very, very relevant because he wrote it last summer, I think it was, somewhere in the northern hemisphere, let's put it this way. He wrote it last year. So a lot of the stuff that he talks about in this book is so relevant right now. So I really, really enjoyed it, and I invited him to come back to the podcast to talk about this because it is such a topic that it's in everybody's minds right now. What is going to happen to my job? Am I going to go back to the office or not? Or is it going to be a mix between office and home? What's happening? So it turns out that there are trends and there are ways to make this transition better, and go back, instead of going back to our previous situation, we go forward into something better. So let's get started and let me introduce you to Colin. Colin D. Ellis is an award-winning international speaker, Amazon #1 best-selling author, and renowned culture change and project management expert who works with organizations around the world to help them transform the way they get things done. Able to draw on more than 30 years of public and private sector leadership experience in the UK, New Zealand, and Australia, Colin shares his knowledge of workplace culture and project management through his books, programs, and speeches. In 2020, the Project Book, How to Deliver Consistently Great Projects, was named Australian General Business Book of the Year, while Culture Fix, How to Create a Great Place to Work, was also a finalist. His latest book, Culture Hacks, 26 Ideas to Transform the Way You Work, was released in 2021. He is also the creator of the Culture Makers Community, a virtual community that connects people and culture ideas from around the world. His presentations and workshops provide people with actions they can take themselves to be successful. They contain anecdotes, statistics, practical insights, and plenty of humor to ensure that audiences are engaged and laughing. Colin is originally from Liverpool in the UK and now lives with his family in Melbourne, Australia. Colin, welcome back to the Project Management for the Masses podcast. How are you?
I'm good, Caesar. It's great to be back. I had a look before we started here. It's been almost 4 years since I last spoke to you on here. A few things have happened in that time.
Sure, I'm sure. Yeah, a few things have happened to mostly everybody, which is actually a great segue for today's conversation because we're going to talk about the aftermath of some of the things that have happened in the last 4 years. And 4 years ago, you were a guest, and we stay in touch. I follow you on social media. You just have the coolest content. You keep writing. just an inspiring person to follow. So I recommend everybody to go and follow Colin after you listen to the podcast or watch the video that we're recording today. So thank you for keeping up with your content creation and all the wonderful things that you do.
Thank you, Caesar. Yeah, it's one of those things that I don't want my brain to turn to mush. And so I figured I'd just keep writing to keep that at bay, you know?
Right. So right before we started here, we were talking about, working from home and how that has changed for you. I had already been working from home, and we'll go into that a little bit as we continue our conversation here. But I think a lot of people are right now, if you're listening to this in the future, which you are, because nobody's listening to this right now or in the past. Right now is January 2022, and we're like probably peaking the Omicron variant or whatever. Who knows how many more variants we're gonna get after this one. But it seems like things are starting to want to go back to normal. Like the virus is a bit weaker now, and people are being able to. A lot of people are vaccinated, and even those who are not, they seem to be handling this variation a bit better. And the question now is, what's going to happen to work? Are we going to go back to the office? Are we going to stay working from home or remotely? And, like I said, I've been working remotely for a while. In fact, our company is distributed, so we don't really have an office. Everybody's working from wherever they want. But I have friends here who are locally and friends on social media who are having these conversations with their managers. A lot of managers are really pushing hard for folks to go back to the office, and the whole thing has sparked a lot of very interesting conversations. So, in your point of view, and based on the book that you wrote, what do you think the future is going to look like going forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. I just want to make the point as well. Peaking the Omicron is a great name for the next Star Trek movie. Star Trek, Peaking the Omicron. Right. It's
make it so.
It's been a weird old time, Caesar, in the world of work. I myself was working hybrid in 2001, back at the tail end of Y2K. If people remember that was the last big thing we all panicked about, kind of at that time, what it required was really, we had the technology, we had the security. We did at the time with these little dongles. I think most of all, as a team, we had the trust of the manager. I think what we've seen in the last couple of years is lots of organizations making lots of big grand statements about hybrid working. And, that's why it kind of moved me to write the hybrid handbook, because I don't think people really understand what hybrid actually is. Most of us for the last 2 years, and I'll come back to distributed in a minute, most of us in the last 2 years have been working remotely. We haven't been working in a hybrid way. It hasn't been a choice. We've been under stay-at-home orders. We've been literally forced to work from home, whereas hybrid really is more of a choice. It's something that you agree at the start of the week how you're going to work. Distributed, generally, you set your team up as a more hybrid workforce from the start. So that becomes easier. And I think where we are right now is we've got lots of managers who are desperate to get people back to the office because they think there's a sense of normality or normalcy that will return with that. And of course, that's not true, because the world of work has changed significantly forever, and what there needs to be, as well as the return to office, because there needs to be a return to office, and we can talk about that. But is this agreement that actually what we're now going to do is we're going to start trialing hybrid work. We're going to look at ways that we can provide people with greater flexibility. But I think the key learning should have been over the last 2 years is most of what we did in offices was massively unproductive. And that's the thing that we need to address, as well as where work needs to take place.
That makes sense. I mean, we've heard it for years, that meetings are dysfunctional and commuting is a waste of time. And while there's been books and and speakers and all sorts of content around that, how to make meetings better, I don't think it was until now that we actually had to do something about it, because otherwise, if we have a day full of meetings now, you're just sitting in front of a computer, doing Zoom all day, and even the most meeting happy person out there will agree that this is subpar. So I feel like a lot of the conversations that we've had in the past about, we can work remotely, we can work from anywhere, the internet is here, why not do that, has been a lot of talk and not a whole lot of action. And now all of a sudden we have to, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned in the book that the office is one place where work happens, but not the only place. Right? And I think maybe some managers have a hard time wrapping their minds around that. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, they do, because that's not the world of work in which they grew up, Caesar. And, for years, I've talked about the fact that most of the issues that we face in work aren't limited to one generation. They're multi-generational. And unfortunately, what we do when a new generation joins the workforce, we infect them with the bad habits that we've got in previous generations. But I think what you're seeing right now is you've got people from the baby boomer generation, people from Gen X, which very much me, who the way of thinking of work is everybody comes to the office between 9 and 5 and they go home, and they want to see people to believe that they're doing work. Now, you look at Gen Z, you look at millennials, they're used to using technology to communicate wherever they are in the world. They're not limited by four walls. Actually, what they're looking for more than anything else is a sense of purpose. They're looking for a sense of safety and a sense of belonging, all of which can exist without the four walls. So managers have really got to challenge themselves globally to really come to terms with the fact that the world of work has changed, and to redefine the culture that they need such that people can work from anywhere. But I will say, and I'll come back to this a number of times, is it is important that people return to the office such that we can actually come to these cultural agreements and figure out how hybrid working is going to work, because we haven't been doing hybrid at all for the last 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of an emergency that we had to tackle without much preparation. We've been besides working from home for a while now, we've been homeschooling our kids since the beginning. And a lot of people have come to us for advice on that, now I have to homeschool, basically asking for advice and tips. And like, this is what you're doing now is not homeschooling. This is like COVID schooling. This is not like we homeschool because it was a choice that we made and we planned for it. We had years to plan for this before the babies came. And okay, when we were ready. But this is like against your will and temporary, and everybody's struggling. So, and I think the same applies to work. Maybe if you had a bad experience working from home now, and you really want to go back to the office, maybe it's not a problem with working remotely per se, but the circumstances which led to it. You agree with that?
Yeah, I do. And I've worked with lots of teams over the last couple of years, Caesar, and one of the things that I've been talking about is this need as a team. It doesn't matter whether you're a project team or a small team or a department, a startup. I've worked with literally all kinds of teams. What's been missing, and it's been missing for a while now, is this agreement of how we'll work, such that then we can decide where we need to work. And that's how hybrid happens. You have lots of organizations, and the tech companies were great at kind of grandstanding. People can work from home forever. Like, cool. But you don't know if it's going to work. You've never done it before. Most of you have never done it before. And so you don't know how to work. Also, there's a lot of organizations saying this have got what I would call office privilege. They don't have people working out in the field, like, field engineers and all these kind of people. They can't work from home forever. Right. So how do you manage the divisions there? But that agreement on how you'll work together is crucially important. And this is where you actually get to kind of pull down some of those things that are broken, things about the meetings, things about the emails. How do we use asynchronous tools? How do we use synchronous tools? Why did everything suddenly become a Zoom call? I'll tell you why. Because we went from in-person back-to-back in-person meetings to back back-to-back Zoom meetings because that's what people were comfortable with. It wasn't what was productive. And none of us at the time, we had 2 teenagers at home, Caesar, and even though my wife and I are self-employed, we couldn't do the work that we would normally do with the kids at home. We weren't productive all of that time. We wanted to make sure we were helping them with their mental health. And at no stage did I homeschool. We provided our kids with structure. That's all we did. They came to us with questions. We were like, yeah, you should email your teacher about that. Like math, forget it. So I think, it's been missing for a while, this agreement on kind of how we work, getting to understand each other's personalities, being able to have empathy for each other, agreeing the behaviors that you need to see from each other, talking about how you're going to collaborate and work together, and then making time for creativity. That's all been missing for a long time. And that's all required. That agreement is required if you feel safe, able to contribute, and then you can work from anywhere because everything's in place.
Okay, so before we continue with my conversation with Colin, I'd like to take a moment here to talk about today's episode sponsor, which is Magic Mind. Magic Mind, if you've been listening to this podcast, you've heard me talk about it before. Magic Mind is something that's really, really helping me focus, helping me do those tasks that require concentration. I don't know if this has been happening to you, and I don't know if this is because I'm getting older or if it's because there's just so many distractions in the world today. I mean, even as I'm recording this, I'm getting notifications here from Slack. Let me turn those off. But the fact is, I can go through a long checklist fairly quickly if the tasks that I'm checking off are easy to do, like if they don't require a whole lot of thinking and concentration. So for example, reply to an email or check my calendar, things like that. But whenever I have to actually focus on something that requires concentration, so for example, if I'm doing like a performance review for a team member that I know I need to really think and I need to research, I tend to not do those well. I tend to procrastinate on those and leave them to the end of the day, which rolls over to the next day, and then it's Friday, and I'm stressing because I didn't do these things. And talking to other people, I know that this is a problem that a lot of people face today. And I think it's a combination of all these distractions that we have, and we are asked to do all these different tasks in today's knowledge work culture, right? So Magic Mind comes into that scene to help you focus. So it is a small little bottle, and it tastes like a combination of tea with honey. It's kind of a weird taste that at the beginning I thought it was odd, but now I actually quite like it. So it grows on you. And it contains these ingredients who are adaptogens and nootropics and matcha. So for example, adaptogens help decrease stress. Nootropics boost blood flow and cognition. And matcha, I love matcha. Matcha keeps you focused. Helps you keep your focus. Let's put it that way. So the people behind this product, they did a lot of research and they combined all these ingredients that folks have been taking here and there into one product. And the way it works, you take that, you drink it, and I like to do it right after breakfast when I start my workday. And then after 10, 20, 30 minutes, you just become able to focus. You don't feel anything particularly different. It's not like coffee that you take it and then you get excited or you wake up. You don't feel that. All of a sudden you're just like, oh yeah, I can do this, and you feel like you're not procrastinating. So I really recommend it. You give it a try. And if you want to give it a try and you want to support this podcast and support Magic Mind, who's been awesome in sponsoring the PM for the Masses podcast, you can go to magicmind.co/PMP. magicmind.co, it's not com, okay? magicmind.co/PMP. And then you can use the code PMP for 20% off your order. Again, magicmind.co/PMP. Use the code PMP at checkout and let me know how it goes. Go to pmforthemasses.com and click on the contact me button. Let me know if you try it. Let me know how it works for you. I'd love to learn and see if you're experiencing the same benefits that I am. Give it a try. And now let's go back to the show. Now, this book you wrote is I really recommend anybody who is in the workplace, if it was in the work, in the market, working, to read it right now, because it's so timely. And you talk about things from 2021. I think you wrote this last summer or last winter for you. So this is very, very timely, and I really like the way you break it down, especially the areas which require action, right? Because we can't just, hey, now we're remote and just make it so, right? And you break it down into, I think, 6 areas: culture, eligibility, management, workspace, technology, and remuneration, which is some of these things I hadn't thought about in detail as much as you do there, which is great. The culture part, I found that whole chapter applies to any organization, remote or not, or hybrid or not. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it does, Cesar, because we're great at paying lip service to culture. Organization, culture is the most important thing. It's like, okay, cool. What are you doing? We're sending everyone on a Microsoft Teams training course. It's like, dude, that's not culture. Right. That's technology. And yet culture's the difference between success and failure. Cesar, always has been, always will be. Yourself, when you feel part of a team and you feel able to contribute and you're happy in your work, that's when you're going to be your most productive. That's when you're going to work best with other people. When you all want the best for each other on a team. When you have a planning workshop and everybody contributes, Post-it notes all over the place. These are the moments when hey, this is where I'm part of something special. And the teams that thrived during COVID and during the lockdowns were the ones that actually redefined their culture at the start. They recognized that the world of work had changed, and consequently the how of work needed to be redefined. They were the organizations that thrived. The ones that tried to do exactly the same things just by using Teams and Zoom were the ones that really struggled, because what they didn't do is acknowledge that actually we're in a different scenario than we were before. We can't simply replicate what we did face to face by using video technology. It's way more nuanced than that. Also, kind of what we saw during COVID was this increase in empathy and compassion. And we're already starting to see that fall away. We're already starting to see divisions between vaccinated and unvaccinated. Also, the workplace and culture is the great place, is a really good place to address things like, gender pay gaps and all of those kind of things. And we don't realize that until we're removed from the culture, and then you start to see it crumble and start to see it erode. So it's crucially important that senior managers not only take the time to redefine the culture, but also then give it lots of TLC to make sure that it positively evolves in the years to come.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't agree more. Our the company I work for even has, we have a company creed, right? And people can, you're not required to memorize it, but people can quote from it on in a meeting and stuff, because it's such a big part of the culture. But that's something, the culture can always be worked on and improved. And in fact, I think it has to continually be, right? Otherwise that kind of goes away, especially if you're not face to face all the time. And speaking of that, what do you think is the importance of actually bringing the team together in person when possible?
Oh, you've got to do it, Cesar. There are some things that can only be done face to face. As human beings, we're hardwired to need that human interaction. And then we had this narrative at the start of the pandemic that, lockdowns are really great for introverts. And they were in a way, because what we've done for the last 40, 50 years is create working environments that were suitable for extroverts, people like me. Like Open Plan is a great example of a working environment that kills the creativity of introverts, because it's like, they're just too noisy, which is great for people. I want to have a conversation in the kitchen and everyone to hear it. That's my personality. And yet that's not the narrative of the good for introverts is not true. Maybe short term, but we're hardwired to need that social interaction. Now we don't need it all the time. What we need is it periodically. You've got great examples. Zapier are a software company. A great example is they're 100% remote. So not dissimilar to yourselves, really, as is a 100% remote organization. And yet they still came together pre-COVID 4 times a year. And the CEO basically said at the start of the pandemic, said, even though we're 100% remote, our business is still suffering because we can't bring people together face-to-face 4 times a year. So, what I've been saying to my clients and others is as soon as you can, and, making sure that you do it in a safe way and following the guidelines within your organizations, you should come together. You should see each other face-to-face. I'm not suggesting you fall into hugs and take your masks off and do all of those things. But whatever you need to do, come face-to-face and see each other, talk about some of the challenges that you've had, be a little bit vulnerable, and then talk about how you want those relationships to develop such that you can be the best team you can be moving forward.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah. In fact, I just started planning a meetup for my team at the end of April, and everybody's just hyped up. Everybody's so looking forward to it, to be in one place for like about a week, and I'm inviting another team to join. We're going to work on a project together, and can't wait for that. I think our company meets, like the entire company as an organization meets once a year, historically. And then each team will also meet once a year. And then between those two, you're meeting 2 or 3 times a year with other coworkers. And it's great. You come back energized. You those chance meetings that you don't really have much in Slack, but walking down the hall in the hotel, you meet, aren't you from Team X? And then we sit, you're having lunch with somebody that you never met before, and if you figure out you're working on something that is overlapping with what they're working on, and now there's a new project that spuns out of there. So yeah, it is. It's very important to, even if you are 100% remote or distributed, to try to get together when you can. It's very important.
We're fortunate here. Well, not fortunate. We've done a lot of hard work here in Australia. So we've got really high levels of vaccination. So pre-Christmas, I was doing in-person, face-to-face workshops again for the first time in a while, Caesar. People were using my workshops as the first time of coming back together. I can't tell you how much energy there was, how happy people were to see each other. That's not to say they're not thinking about what does hybrid work look like. But there was just this buzz. I did 150 people right the week before Christmas. It was so exciting. I'm heading out to Los Angeles to do my first US one in a while in April. People are so excited. They're creating all of these kind of plans around, what those interactions are going to look like. They're going to go for dinner in the evening. And I think that's great, because what that says is, hey, listen, we've really missed each other. We're not saying that we want to work with each other 5 days a week in the office again, but we've really missed each other. So now's the time to reconnect.
Right. All right. So there's a lot to talk about here, but you mentioned eligibility, and it's one of the chapters there in the book. And you did touch on, some folks, they have to, like if it's a field engineer or, folks work in the service, for example, plumbers and electricians. I mean, they can't work from home. So, you share a statistic there that 52% of people prefer a hybrid model, right? And of all the people who were asked, the largest group that had a preference, I think it was like 29% actually would prefer to go back to the office, which was surprising to me. And I see that, the great resignation, all people quitting their jobs now and going to other jobs. I think that flexibility is a big draw for a lot of folks. I have friends who are being forced to go back to the office, and they're considering quitting their jobs to go find something else. What is, when you look at eligibility, how do you, let's say there might be organizations where a subset of their employees are not eligible to work hybridly. How do you culturally navigate that without creating two classes of individuals within the organization?
Yeah, so I've been talking kind of a lot to HR managers about this, Caesar, because it's crucially important that in the rush to keep your kind of best corporate employees because they want to work hybrid. You don't want to alienate the people that can't. You know, here in Melbourne, we have a large public transport network. We have tram, we have a large tram network. Tram drivers can't work in a hybrid way. You know, I think the example I use in the book is airline pilots. An airline pilot can have full flexibility, so they can design their working time around their family. If they need to go to an appointment, they can change their shifts. They can only ever fly the plane from the cockpit. And what you've got is you've got the back office employees or the corporate employees saying, well, you can't work hybrid, we're going to leave. It's like, it's really tricky. And what HR managers need to do is they need to co-design that experience together. You can't have one rule for the people that can work hybrid and one rule for the others. And there needs to be lots and lots of really good communication around that, such that people don't feel alienated. The thing about the Great Resignation as well, and which you mentioned there, and of course in the early days it was largely hospitality staff. Because there's a lack of immigration around the world, it meant that there was no kind of transient nature of hospitality, which meant that actually hospitality workers were worth more for the first time. Finally, they were worth a little bit more, and they chose to leave bad cultures. And so what we're seeing in the corporate world now is it starts to bleed in. It won't be quite as bad, I don't think, as hospitality, but what we're seeing is people are either they've used COVID to reassess their life. They're going to go back to university. They're going to go do that thing that they said that they would do. Actually, they don't enjoy the job that they're doing, so they're going to look for a different job, sometimes within the same company, or else they're going to leave the organization because the culture's appalling. And yes, sometimes it's about, we're going to give you access to hybrid work. And that's part of that eligible piece. But more often than not, you know, as the old phrase goes, we don't leave organizations, we don't leave bad organizations, we leave bad managers. Right. Often it's the culture that's been created. You know, and I know myself in the past, Cesar, when I was a permanent employee, I left bad cultures and bad managers. And they could have offered me all the hybrid work in the world, and I still would have left because of that guy who behaved in that particular way. So I think, you know, those criteria are important when managers are looking at, you know, kind of at what's available for who. But what you don't want to lose sight of is the parity between employees. Otherwise, you'll create divisions that weren't there before.
Right. And even if, let's say, the entire company is eligible for hybrid work, it's very easy to create a dual culture of the locals and the people who are in the office and people who are not. And this is one of, my opinion, one of the advantages of the fully distributed companies, that there's just one culture. Like, I mean, there's just one approach to communication, right? So there's this temptation of having an in-person, like in a hybrid organization, let's say having a meeting for people who are there in the office, they make all sorts of decisions, and then they all leave. People who are in the meeting, they know what was talked about, but people who are not, they are left out of the loop. While a fully distributed company, the meetings are Zoomed, they're recorded, or there's somebody taking notes. And if you missed it because you're in a different time zone or whatever, they can always go back. And basically the entire communication of the organization is searchable. You can go back and read things that you missed. And that, I find that is probably very tough to do, to ensure, you know, for managers, to ensure that folks who are not in the office that day, they're still part of the conversation.
Yeah, and this is really important. This kind of leads into the next chapter of the book, Cesar, which is about management. Most managers aren't trained on the important things of management. They're usually kind of promoted based on length of service or technical ability, when actually the people that really make a difference are those that connect emotionally and understand how to create an environment where everybody can flourish, right? So a big part of that is what we call psychological safety. It wasn't really talked about in the 80s and 90s, but we knew when it existed because we could contribute. What managers need to ensure is not only they've got the skills to maintain connections of people, they've got the skills to be able to do things in a more virtual way. You know, so I taught, one of the things I've taught to project managers is how to run a work breakdown structure virtually, because most people have never done it virtually. Like, they've only ever done it in a big room, things like that. Right. But also making sure that there aren't side conversations, also making sure that we're not using phrases like, oh, if you were in the office, what you would see is when you're back here. Like, managers who are back in the office going out for lunch, and people who are working from home can't do that. And so these are all skills that managers have never really had to think about before, never really contend with. Empathy being the big one, then communication, and then setting expectations is making sure that everybody understands what's expected of them and that we understand how to get the best out of them because we've taken the time to get to know them, build a relationship such that we know how to communicate with them. So these are all skills that some people have by default because of their personality, and every other manager has to learn if they're to be successful in this hybrid working era.
Right. Yes. I also I like how you talk about behaviors and how we can, as managers, we can set the behavioral tone for others to follow. Little things like, you mentioned in the book too, the fact that folks are working after hours, right? Because they feel like they're always on the clock if they're remote or hybrid. And as a manager, you can model, right, the behavior that you want. So if you ping me after 5 p.m. my time, I may see it, but I'm not going to reply to you. And I do that based on principle. Like I could do that. I mean, I'm let's say I'm available, but by replying to them when it's evening or it's after hours for my time, I am conveying a message that this is expected or that it's okay. And now when they are, pinged after hours, then they'll feel the same pressure, right? So little things like that. As managers, we have that power to model that behavior so they can follow.
Yeah, I recorded a video, I've got these little motivational minutes that I do, Caesar. And last week I talked about the fact that managing people is a privilege, and it is a privilege. You get to motivate and inspire someone on a daily basis, but that requires a lot of energy. Yeah. It also requires an endless amount of role modeling. And the thing is about role modeling is that people will generally copy what they see, good and bad. So if you're sending emails late at night, you're either adding to someone's stress or anxiety, or else you're giving them permission to do likewise. It's usually one of the two. And, I made a career as a former manager myself. I made a career out of challenging the status quo and challenging some of the dumb things that people did and finding a better way. We would never have 30-minute and 60-minute meetings because that's the Outlook default. We would do 20 minutes and 40 minutes. I had quite random meetings. I would have like 17 minutes. And people would say, Colin, why is this a 17-minute meeting? I'd be like, it just feels like a 17-minute meeting, Emails late at night, I would always have inbox zero. We would talk about when to send emails, when not to send emails. We were conscious of the time. So I would use the scheduling function. Caesar, even like we're talking about, kind of 2008, 9, 10, way back when. So that if I had a thought and I needed to send an email, I would still write the email because that's my choice, right? I would still write the email, but I would schedule it for Monday morning. And so managers have really got a choice. They can either kind of conform to some of these cultural norms, or they can set a different tone and role model what's expected of everybody else. And the same goes for behavior. It really, really does. I'm staggered in this day and age. We still have stories on the front pages or the kind of web pages of misbehaving CEOs who just haven't learned, and they deserve all they get, to be perfectly honest with you. Is, kind of making a difference to a human's life is very much the role of a senior manager. So they've got to role model what good looks like 100% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I like how you put that as a privilege. A lot of people would say it's a burden, like they don't want to do this because I find that those folks, they would probably make good managers if they know how hard it is, right? They would treat it with the respect that it deserves, as opposed to the folks who just want it because it's a promotion. So I agree. So, and these are principles that apply and have always applied.
I got a funny story about that.
Yeah.
Sorry to jump in. So I spoke at a project management conference in Auckland, New Zealand. I want to say it was 2018. It might have been 2017. But anyway, I did the speech, and at the end, it's like, anybody got any questions? And one guy stood up, and I kid you not, he said, "What advice have you got to a project manager who doesn't like managing people?" That was his question. Uh-huh. So you had this kind of ripple of laughter from people. And so my advice, I just said, go and be a BA. I was like, they don't have to manage anybody but themselves. I was like, because, the expectation is that you show up every day and you put yourself into service to somebody else. And if you don't like managing people, project management is not the career for you. Right. The clue is in the name,
Right. Yes, agreed. Yeah. It is a team effort. And if you're at the head, you need to liking it is a benefit for sure, because Great. Okay, you talk also about workspace and technology. Maybe we can talk about those two together. So, like you said, the technology is not new. I mean, Zoom has been around. I've had a Zoom account since 2013, and I'm actually grandfathered into this awesome plan. I don't think they offer it anymore. It's very, very cheap for the top account. So it's been around for a while. And before Zoom, there was Skype and what was the other one from the expensive one?
Microsoft Messenger way back in the day.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Yahoo Messenger. You can do video calls with that. Yeah. And then there were the Cisco offerings, and so this has
WebEx.
Been WebEx. Yeah. It's been around for a while, and so this is not what we're seeing now. Is not a result of the technology, right? It's been accelerated because of the health situation right now. But one thing that has come out of this is like some new technologies, for example, for tracking people, right? And see when they are working. I know your thoughts on that, but why don't you share that with the audience?
Insidious practice of tracking people. It's appalling. Nothing says I don't trust you like tracking someone without them knowing about it. The thing is, as well, Caesar, is they think employees are dumb. We'll find a way around that. They're already selling products to keep your mouse moving to show that you're always online. It's just that organizations are, if your organization is one of them that does that, and you're listening to this podcast, it's the worst kind of organization to work for, because what it's doing is treating you like a child. It's kind of monitoring exactly what you do. It's absolutely appalling. Can I be any more categorical than that? It is. If you've got issues with productivity, if you've got issues with I guess, I don't know, engagement, then you need to look at the root causes of those. Usually what organizations do, Caesar, is they have issues with one or two people and they force rules onto everybody because they lack the courage to be able to deal with the one or two people. And I had one of those in my last permanent job. I had one of those people. And we had a YouTube ban in the team that I worked in, the department that I worked in. There was a YouTube ban because one person used to send inappropriate videos to people. And so I put that one person on performance management. We removed the YouTube ban. Guess what? Everything was fine. And so, kind of technology is there to enhance the way that we work together. And if organizations are using it for kind of ill will, then really what's going to happen is they're going to end up losing all of the people they need to be successful. And so you kind of, you're going to get if you're an organization that does that, you're going to get what you deserve. Instead, put some more time and effort into talking about how you'll use technology, because I think that's the biggest challenge that we've seen, Caesar, is everybody rolled out Microsoft Teams, but no one trained anybody on how to use it properly. And even if they did, there was no agreement on how you'll use the tools. So you're still getting 1,000 emails a week. You're having 1,000 video calls a week. You're getting 1,000 Slack messages a week. And all of them are saying and doing the same things. And that comes back to that cultural piece to sort of say, well, what's that agreement we have around our technology and how it will be used such that it adds to the quality of our outputs, doesn't get in the way of it.
Right. And I think in the end, it's a difference in management style, because it makes way more sense to monitor the output of workers as opposed to how they're, whether they're there for an X number of hours, because they're hired to produce something, right? Or to fix a hole. Let's put it that way. They're hired to create a result. They're not hired to be there 8 hours a day, warming a chair. That is a proxy that people have used in the past to ensure that people are working. But the best thing is to measure the output, but that's harder and people are not used to doing it, right? So I think these are all attempts to manage by walking around, which is what a lot of folks do. But how about come up with some metrics that you can measure the output of each worker, and then you can, if there is an issue, you can address it individually with each one of them, and not have to make these these YouTube bans, like you said, that apply to everybody, and it's morale crushing, right?
Yeah, you said it. It's harder. So it's harder so people avoid it. It's harder to set expectations and hold people to them and have the courage to have those conversations when they're required so people avoid it. The other thing that I would say, just very quickly on that point, Caesar, is the same managers that track employees wouldn't think twice about dragging them to a 2-hour meeting that's of no value to them. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's we need to change this mindset. And I think, like you said, the new generation, the texting generation, the SMS generation, this generation have proved that you can be in touch with the entire world and not be talking over each other. So you can, and the only way to do that is asynchronously, right? If you bring 7 billion people into a room, you don't have communication, you have chaos. But you can do that. Yeah, we can communicate asynchronously and have a great time as humanity. And the last point you make is about money, about pay, right? You say that organizations need to rethink their compensation packages to ensure parity regardless of location. Some companies have announced that if you want to work from home, that's fine, but you're going to get a pay cut. Other companies have said, no, we're paying, you get paid based on the role, regardless of where you live or whether you come into the office or not. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, this for me is possibly one of the trickiest parts of the whole thing, because organizations will look for, and this is me thinking the worst of every organization. Not every organization does this, but organizations will look for ways to pay people less. So Facebook were the first one that came out and basically said, you can work from home, but it's location-based pay. Reddit went the complete opposite way and said, we're going to pay you a New York salary wherever you're based. And of course, what will happen is Reddit will attract all of the people that don't want to take a pay cut from Facebook. So smart thinking from Reddit, because they recognize that by paying people just a little bit more, we're not talking about paying them the earth, what they'll do is attract all of these great employees. We've been kind of, as a world, we've been working hard to close pay gaps, to make sure people are paid fairly for the work that they do, Caesar. And there's a very real risk that this could all be undone by kind of hybrid working remuneration packages. Now, some of the better organizations will say, no, you pay what you get paid based on your role. It's got nothing to do with your location. It's got nothing to do with your gender. It's got nothing to do with how many years experience. That's the right way to do things. But trust me, people will find ways to pay people less as a result of hybrid working. So, my appeal to organizations and managers that may be listening to this is, don't be that organization. Pay people fairly based on the work that they do, regardless of where they're based, regardless of their gender, such that we can improve the quality of life for people in roles around the world.
I couldn't agree more. And in fact, I don't even see I'm sure there's a logic in there, but if you're producing the same amount of work and you're not coming into the office, you're saving the company money, aren't you?
Yeah.
Right?
I don't get it. As soon as I read about Facebook and they were like, oh, well, you've not got the costs of commuting, you've not got this, you've not got that. I'm like, and?
Yeah.
and what? I'm still doing the same job. I'm still doing the same outputs. In fact, if I'm working at home, honestly, because I got a question right at the start of the pandemic from someone in the media, and they said, oh, people are just going to wing it, aren't they? They're just going to have long weekends. It's like, my experience so far is people are working longer hours because the laptop is there all of the time and they can't switch off from it. And so, kind of for me, I've seen greater productivity, not reduced productivity, which, requires more pay, not 20% less.
Right. And why not live in a world where if you're producing what you're getting paid to produce, if you want to take an extra day off, I mean, why not? Right? I think we should.
Yeah.
Right. You're not winging. You're just being productive and using your time better.
Yeah, there's a big push, Caesar, at the minute for the 4-day working week.
Yeah.
Right. And people are like, oh, we need the 4-day working week. And I read this piece and it was like, yeah, I'd rather work 4 10-hour days. I'm like, if you honestly think you're just going to be able to switch off on that 5th day, you're completely wrong. Actually, how about you just address some of the dumb stuff that you do that stops you being productive during your own working week, that then creates the space and time where you've got the ability to think, where you can clock off a little bit earlier, you feel trusted and empowered to do the work that you need to do. That's a better option than trying to follow some new fad that gives you a long weekend, you know?
Right. And then what? In 50 years, like, oh, maybe a 3-day work week. And we can, you know, like, where does that stop? You're not addressing the root issue, which is productivity and being compensated for what you produce as opposed to the number of hours that you're warming a chair.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Colin, always a pleasure. The book is called The Hybrid Handbook, How to Set Yourself Up for the Future of Work. It's a pithy read, highly recommended. And Colin, if people want to learn more about you and what you're doing, where should they go?
They can find me on LinkedIn. Caesar, that's usually the best place, Colin D. Ellis, or you can head to my website, which is colindellis.com, or if you just search Colin D. Ellis on Amazon, you can get access to all of the books on there.
Sounds great. And you can find links to all these on the show on the notes for today's show, which is at pmforthemasses.com/140 for episode 140. Colin, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your generous, for being so generous with your time with me and my audience. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the PM for the Masses podcast.
Tune in next week for more great ideas on how to manage your projects better and truly stand out in your industry.
PMforthemasses.com